Hello, folks. Welcome to the True Media Roundtable. I have five special guests with me today, and we're going to discuss important topics related to natural law. Um, my name's Chris Jantzen, if I didn't already say that. My website's endevil.life, and you can find my work there and at the One Great Work Network. I'm just going to have everybody introduce themselves quickly. We'll go around. I'll start with Nathan.
Hi, my name's Nathan Ribble. I've been here talking with a couple of friends here now with Chris and Will, and as well with other people like Aaron, now Lisa and Cory. I was here, just with Chris, and Chris was invited me to do the roundtable from Mark's class we took last year. It was a really good class, and I'm really excited to join this conversation.
Right on. Glad you came. It's good to see you. And let's go to Aaron.
How's it going, everybody? Aaron Butler. Um, Most of the time, I'm going to be behind the scenes on the One Great Work Network doing some producer roles and hopefully getting on the content creation side here pretty soon. And yeah, just I was in the How to Become the True Media seminar as well. And Nathan, I'm glad to have you here. And yeah, looking forward to this discussion.
I don't know what happened, Aaron, but your screen like turned green. You're in
Is
green
it still
world.
green?
Yeah,
It's
it
been
went
doing that. I don't
totally
know.
green. It's
I
wild.
really have
I don't.
no idea.
It's
Negative
not.
It was
It's
world.
doing
not
that with
Green to
me
green for
and
me.
me.
Cory. Oh my gosh.
Looks good.
Oh,
Purple.
yeah,
Oh,
you
there
have
you
Oh, it
go.
looks good from you
Yeah,
guys.
it
I
looks
don't
Yeah,
know.
It went
Oh,
away. Whatever you did, fixed it.
so weird. I didn't do anything.
probably a local glitch.
It happened. It's the second time it's happened. I don't know why.
it's only
Well,
on
Yeah,
his
those
end.
I'll be
damn
green if I'm
internet
green.
gremlins, man.
Yeah.
Everywhere.
We'll work with it.
Yeah.
Let's go to Leslie next.
Hi, I'm Leslie Powers. I'm friends with Will and Chris, and I've been really inspired by the opportunity to interact with them, and have been inspired to start creating some of my own content and wanting to participate in these conversations. I'm really excited actually listening to the previous conversations you guys have had, and but like chomping at the bit to want to share and participate. So that's why I'm here today. In terms of my background in work, I work as a social worker and clinical counselor. So I have a real investment in helping people to do their own personal work, and then having listened to Mark Passio's work over the almost the last 3 years, a little less than 3 years ago is when I was introduced. I'm super inspired by his work. So my endeavor is to combine, the psychological and change, the work of psychological change and doing self-work with the philosophy of natural law.
Awesome.
Right on. Well, thanks for coming, Leslie.
Yeah, glad to be here.
Cory.
Hey, how's it going? My name's Cory, just a fellow human being, a messenger, trying to see what actions could be done in the name of truth. It's something a lot of people, question on a day-to-day basis. What could I do in my day-to-day life? What could I do for this? They feel passionate, they see the value and the knowledge that a lot of you guys share with natural law. And so, a lot of my work is often focused on, well, what could we do, with that knowledge? How could we bring it out to more people? And I'm going to continue to show others how we can do that, and also how we could teach it in different ways, because that's another question. How do you teach this knowledge to other people? If it's so simple at the end of the day, but yet it's so complex, how do we bring it to people? And that's could be a challenge for some people because they see how much it opens their eyes to everything, and then they get involved with all these little rabbit holes and they get all mixed up. So I think, with all of us here, I think we could also provide more guidance to all the topics at hand. And so I appreciate you guys always, bringing us all here and all the topics, Chris and Will, I appreciate it. I'm just a health coach. So kind of like Leslie, I actually did a lot of consulting in the past and had my own like business and so forth. I still actually do that. It's something I've a little postponed as of lately because I focus more on natural law and bringing that to people, as I see it as very, very important, if not more important than nutrition. But of course, they're intertwined, health and natural law. I say natural law heals the world, natural healing, natural health heals the body. It's very important, microcosmic, macrocosmic, that we heal both worlds. And it's totally possible, but it starts with the conversation. It starts with the idea, the thought that it is possible, and then we put into action through understanding the knowledge of the actions themselves, not just the knowledge itself. Thank you.
Right on. I love how you can just spit that all out, Cory. Good job. Will, you want to give yourself a little introduction?
Yeah, what's up, brothers and sisters? Will Keller from the Bay Area, California, and my website's naturalfreedomleague.com. I'm also a fellow seeker, and kind of how Cory said, my job is to simplify the profound and talk about nature, the causal factors, and how they correspond with consciousness and other beings. So I'm looking forward to this convo tonight.
Right on. You do a good job of it too, don't you, Will?
Mhm.
And looks like we have a new face here. I haven't met Ronnie
Ronnie's
yet.
awesome.
What's up, Ronnie? Welcome.
What's going on, guys? Is the audio? Can you hear me?
Yeah. Hey, coming in good.
All right,
Want to just
cool.
do a little intro? Introduce yourself.
Yeah, I'm Ronnie Ross. Yeah, I basically have been introduced to you guys and so many other people through Cory, which was all through Mark Passio, learning about natural law. And I guess, I don't know if you guys have noticed, but it seems to me like ever since Mark, if you're familiar with his work, threatened to burn the whole thing to the ground, people have been coming out of the woodwork teaching natural law and trying to spread the message. So I would consider myself also a student and a teacher of natural law, and that is what I'm trying to do with my podcast and show, which I just started. I'm only on episode 2. So
Oh,
Awesome,
cool.
brother.
What's the name of your show?
the RFRP, the Ronnie fucking Ross podcast.
All right.
Love it.
Cool. Right on. Well, good to have you here, man. I'm glad you came. And you guys were hitting on kind of the point I was going to make today for subject matter is, I was thinking about know thyself is sort of some of the oldest, most universal wisdom. And I think it's pretty much key to making the changes that we all want to see in the world. And it's something that we can all agree on, that ourselves and folks who might be listening to us talk, we can work on changing ourselves from the inside. And that can have a huge effect on the world outside of us and around us. So to start off, let's go in that same order. We'll start with Nathan again. And let's just talk a little bit about what ego is and what that means to you.
All right. So, well, what ego means to me, I feel that ego has a real tool, a real use in life. And for me, a very loose understanding from going from psychology and coming from mainstream psychology, it could be seen as a part of yourself. And there's a couple parts of yourself. There's a self that you have used every single day, that you can show to people, and you can interact with people. Then there's the internal self, where it's like a part of you that wants a little bit more. And sometimes it's that tool is called the ego. And the ego really, sometimes when it can be, like I say, it can be used as a tool, really really has profound use when going to say, okay, I'm gonna start and actually do something with myself. For instance, if I want to go upstairs and make a sandwich, I have to actually do it myself. It's not gonna, I'm gonna start thinking about it. I'm gonna start using myself, and just not gonna really manifest. But when it comes to say like, oh, I want my mother to make it for me, no, like, I mean, I have to have my own volition to think for myself and act for myself. And when it comes to that, I can say all the things that I want about the ego. Yeah, I feel like the points that I'm getting at when it comes to really acting out in the world, ego for me, sometimes it's really hard to really formulate some thoughts sometimes, but I figure it's simpler than I think it is. Because a lot of times when I think about ego, I'm like, oh, you have like a stuck up ego, like stuck up meaning, you know, it really just it's harder for me to describe. I figure because my ego is like, okay, can I really do this? And if I think I can, I don't want to act like I can. That's like performing. So it's like, really, like, I know very little about the ego, yet at the same time, I use it every day. I don't know, I can show my ego, and that's like, if I'm showing my ego, it's like, wait, I don't really want to do that. It's like a little bit of vulnerability right there. And so vulnerability for me is like, all that I want to be. I want to be me. And at the same time, that's also the ego.
That's
So
Yeah, I think that's a good kind of a good way to put it. And you mentioned the ego being a tool, and I think it's probably one of, it's the first tool. It's the ego is how our consciousness can perceive the distinction between the outer and the inner. It's what separates us from the outer world. And I think there's a book that I found on the Ark, and it was the Arcane Formulas of Mental Alchemy, and they mentioned a concept called egohood, and it distinctioned the lowercase ego and egohood as being ego being the awareness of the ego and the personality, and a lot of we associate the ego with our persona and who we think we are, whereas I think egohood differentiates the individuality rather than just separateness. So it's egohood is coming to awareness of the many personas, and that you actually are individuated from the you know from the persona, from the mask. It's a tool to recognize anything. Basically, we couldn't accept, where we couldn't be conscious of anything if we didn't have the polarity between ourselves and to compare it to what's outside of us. And so I think that a misconception about ego is that it's all bad, whereas destroy the ego, no problems, whereas you can have a lot of problems by trying to remove your ego too much. And I think that there is obviously a valid, you can have egohood and know who you are, and in order to step into who you are, you have to be able to know where you actually are individuated from all these names and all these, the ego will put things in boxes and boxes and boxes after boxes, and you have to be able to differentiate where you are behind the external and behind the separation that we see. That's kind of where I think I'll leave the ego. There's a lot to it. There's so many ways that you can go off and kind of examine it, but I think egohood is something that's missing because we try to destroy it too much and are afraid of it, rather than trying to pinpoint why we have certain people or why we have certain ego holdups. It's an unconscious thing. If anyone thinks they're going to be able to just get rid of their ego, good luck.
Jump in, Leslie. Let's hear what you got.
So these are the thoughts I have. So ego's that which separates or distinguishes us from other beings, other things. It's how we know ourselves as a unique and separate individual. It helps form our identity. So I see ego as being formed in relationship to other things. So like God experiencing itself through us in all of our diversified forms, through our separation, our egos get to know ourselves through our separate parts. and by seeing how they interact, right? So the ego functions as a protector and a defender of self, a goal setter and an organizer. It has a function. Freud talks about ego as a mediator between the id or impulses and the superego, which is our moral ideals. I see it as a, in my work, that the human mind compartmentalizes itself, in these many roles and masks that we wear, that we have all sorts of parts of ourselves that are not always in unison. They're not always communicating. And the ego optimally can be a facilitator, right? Seated at the head of that table, listening to all the parts of ourselves, seeing ourselves within our personality structure. I was thinking about the idea of awakened ego as a source of our personal power, our awakened ego as a sort of our mastery, a balanced lens to view ourselves and the world through. And then, of course, we can talk about how when we're out of balance, where there's too much of the other parts, dominating, right? So the ego can go and have extremes, right? Where maybe it separates too much from that which it's not. So right there.
Awesome. Thanks, Leslie. That was great. Cory?
Hey, yeah. So, very good points, and I think Aaron mentioned a lot of points, sort of with the conflict between ego and non-ego. But there's a lot of compartments to this, and I don't like to make things sound generalized, but ego can be perceived by some folks as left brain imbalance, but it could be on both left brain and right brain imbalance. It could also be perceived as not enough inaction, with that of which is described in the Tao teaching, for example, and other forms. But I think it's important to mention some of the big elephants in the room when it comes to ego. So not that it's like left brain or right brain, but rather, yes, it is the extremes among them that ego will attach to. Now, let's also not get ego sort of mixed up with confidence, right? And wanting to move forward, with a good head on your shoulders. But then there's the expression, well, you have too big of a head, too big of a mouth, and that's when you take things to the extreme where maybe you're talking too much, maybe you're not listening enough, thus maybe you're seeking too much attention. A lot of folks who are in the modern day and age who are on social media very much follow this egotistical mindset, whether they even know so or not, by seeking attention by other folks. They may complain about what's happening on social media, and they're not just reporting the facts, they're actually looking for people to give them attention. It depends on that intention then in such case. So I'm just saying that there is a lot of narcissism when it comes to online behavior in the modern day and age, with folks looking for that type of egotistical system. But you have to question, where is this ego coming from? Why is it something important to look at? And how does it build? So I say the biggest factors that we have here playing with our ego are the systems that are basically built on ego. And if you look at the systems that are built on ego, it's very often the hierarchical systems. The pyramid system in its very nature is one built on ego. It has the the self at the top of the pyramid. And one may embrace that knowledge and use it over others. They are being God themselves. They feel they have the power to rule over another human being. Thus, they put away their empathy and care for their own natural rights and their own ability to have the same knowledge that they do. They keep it for themselves and use it against the others. So that is the biggest problem we have in today's world. And that's not just across government, but it's across the police institutions that are also built in such a system. And basically all the main institutions that are attached to the system we call government, because they are all based on the same pyramid hierarchical structure. It is not like a typical hierarchy that you'll see with a family or with a workplace. It doesn't work necessarily the same way. There's a higher ego to this because there's many compartments to it, right? There's many bricks, and people are detached from one another, and they're put in darkness. We can go over the hierarchy system if you want. It's a whole nother topic. But the point I'm trying to say is that these systems tend to be built in ego or left brain dominance, but those are not two one and the same. Ego tends to, like I say, attract to those brain imbalances when we fall toward it. Because somebody can believe by meditating all day, they're not embracing ego, but they could still be embracing ego. And I've had talks with people about this too, because, there's a lot of spiritual folks who have those practices, and they know it helps them feel better in today's world, and that's perfectly fine. What I'm saying is the deliberate use of it, when they know they should probably be doing something else or take a little bit of action in their life. Like Leslie says, it's a bit of the balance between inaction and action, or left brain and right brain. Having one or the other can fall to an extreme and thus fall to ego, but it doesn't necessarily guarantee it. So that's why I actually have a video titled "Let Go of My Ego, Let Go into the Eco." You notice the words I use, my and the. What is all around us? Or what if it's only just us? What if we're just solipsist? We're only thinking about ourselves, only thinking about what we can pertain to, the knowledge of the self, and not the knowledge of the external world. And so I say, let's go, let's go into the eco, because that system works as a circle, not as like a rigid triangle, but that the triangle is not of synthesis. So that triangle of hierarchy is a broken triangle, obviously, since there's a part that's detached from the rest. What we're looking for is a triangle that combines all the angles together, one that is complete and whole. Thus, the circle archetype is whole. It represents unity. It represents bringing people together. So we can get mixed with archetype in this process as well when it comes to hierarchy. But to distinguish, yes, the circle archetype is to represent even the triangle archetype when it's fulfilled, when it's holistic. So same thing with the brain, right? If it's holistic, the whole brain, we're not just looking at the left or right brain, we're looking at the whole brain. And it is not something that you can perfect, which is why so many people may focus on ego or feel like that is the main thing to everything. But of course, that's not always the case, and it does depend on how we look at it.
Thanks, Cory. That was a mind load right there. A lot to think about in one quick spurt there. Let's go to Will. Will, what do you got?
Yeah, man, a lot of good points you guys were talking about. I'm going to try to make this super simple. So when I'm talking about ego, it's not the inflated self-importance ego, right? Egotistical. We're talking about, this is the conscious persona that we have as an individual. So I know that I'm going to put the glass of water to my mouth and not someone else's mouth. And this is, our whole personality is based on the ego. And also, everything that we're conscious about is filtered through the ego. This is the center of our field of awareness. And it's important because we don't want to identify with the ego, right? And this is where we get into ego identification, where I am my job, or I am this, I am these masks that I wear, I am this type of personality. And when that happens, then the ego is dominant. The ego needs to be used as a tool to control. If you don't have that, that's why the new age deception of destroy the ego, you can never destroy the ego in this physical realm. It can't happen. But what you can do is have it take control, and then you won't be able to filter out your instinctual behaviors. You're going to be more of an animalistic state of mind. And that's where selfishness comes in. It's all about me, take, and all these dark aspects start to arise and take control. So it's important to, we're obviously trying to make the unconscious conscious, and having full control over the ego and working with the ego is extremely important to do that. So instead of destroying it, unify it and control it.
Nice. I like that. Thanks, Will. And let's go to Ronnie.
You guys have crushed it.
Is there anything left?
It might be a hard pass, man. It's like,
that's all good.
I've been learning so much from you guys. I'm so grateful that Cory invited me to this to begin with. So
it's hard to go first, and it's hard to go last too.
Yeah, last gets to be kind of tough because everybody's put out so much.
Yeah.
But you know, if something comes to you, feel free to jump in if you want to say something else about the ego. Where I was going to go with that, and I'm kind of surprised actually to hear everybody's reply, because so often the ego is talked about in a negative connotation, and I think that's like egotism or egocentrism, you know, where people are so caught up in their own ego that it's like solipsism, you know, where they think the whole world revolves around their self, and that's a common problem in our society. But I liked hearing so many of you kind of talking about the other aspects of the ego as being this, you know, the awareness or the consciousness, the arbitrator, the part of us that sees what we're doing and tries to balance it out, you know. And one other aspect of that occurred to me is, you know, we last week we were talking about belief, and throughout life, all the things that happen to us and the things we do, we form these this picture of who we are, and it's our and people say things like, oh, I'm no good at this, or I'm no good at that, and you know, you hear a young person say that. Like, I remember my own daughter saying, oh, I'm no good at this, I can't do that. And I'm like, how do you know? You have never even tried. You know, how have you formed this idea about who you are when every moment that's passing is changing? You're not even the same being you were. You know, science says your whole body changes in 7 years. Every part of it has been reformed. So, and every moment is a new moment. So you really can't be something that you were before. Um, Before we started this meeting, Nathan was mentioning Eckhart Tolle. I never get his last name quite right, but you know, the practice of the presence is something I think of being in the moment and kind of being aware that there's an observer, a part of yourself that can sit back and notice what you're doing and being like, oh, I don't like when I do that, you know. And I think that's important, to start recognizing that there are these different layers to the self, and that we can observe and regulate and center ourselves. We don't have to be locked into what people think we are or what we previously thought we were because of actions in the past. So that's kind of my little take on the ego, and I think it's a good place to go from there, is to sort of talk about selfishness and selflessness. My recent work, I just was working on the idea of collectivism, and I'm trying to explain in this that, you know, like a lot of people think socialism's a great idea, or, you know, communism could work, you know, this whole Marxist idea that if we all work together and we all share, that would be utopia. But the truth is that it never works out. You know, there's always some ruler, and they start forcing us to do things, and they feed people to the cannons and machine guns, and they don't care about the individual. And so the way we avoid being, you know, just um, death by machine gun or winding up in a prison or locked down is by maintaining our individuality. But on the other side of that, there's this important thing of being selfless. So let's talk a little bit about the balance of selfishness and selflessness. Same order. Go ahead, Nathan.
All right. So when I think of selfishness, so we'll start with selfish being. So
Okay.
if I were to be selfish, I would say If there's a plate of cookies, I could take all the cookies and leave you one, or leave you maybe half a cookie. That's being very selfish and honestly very greedy for myself. And so if I were to say, if I wanted to be very selfless, I'd take no. I'd take, you have them. You take them. And I guess there's a sort of a dualism in that when it comes to, if I don't get anything, that's not really, it's like a giving society on going a little too far. And that's where I feel like people are getting the idea, like the uh, Zeitgeist Project Venus or something like that talks about, everyone gives, and if it was a giving society, what would we have? If we give all of ourselves, then what do we have? And I think the best thing to say is, if we can be selfless with our words, being kind, and I feel like with that, that in the acts that nobody sees, like imagine if you were to go out and do something that no one else would see. Who else would see that? Yourself. I could be selfless in the acts of saying cleaning off my boss's car, no one ever knowing. At the same time, I could be selfish and speed off and kick some dirt into someone else's car and causing them ill. So there's certain acts. I think a lot of this deals with acts. So because a lot of times um, I'm not sure if this in other mammals or anything like that, but if we are really close to really the only ones that can really perceive things like this on a third person basis, like I can take my consciousness and actually observe myself in the corner of the room and realize, my actions in certain cases, and determine myself if I'm, if I'm kind or if I'm not kind, or if this feels good or if it doesn't feel good. And, it kind of involves pretty much the whole being, the spirit, like the physical body. Like if I get little tinglies in my stomach of a selfless or selfish act, my emotions, like if I'm getting all flustered or from like my, in combination with my breathing patterns and things like that. At the same time, I can engage my mental abilities, because then there's a level of communication, and then it's the same time, not I'm thinking about things. It's a very spiritual thing. It could be intuition involved, and with that, I feel like overall feeling of it a lot is defining levels of where property and ownership have in the world of being, if there's an availability, I could have, all these guns, all these foods, all this, all these resources. And then what am I doing it for? I might as, the wording in my case, this is just me. I might as well, give to other people, because of my abundance, because of my efforts, is just, I guess, the who I am. It makes up who I am. And at the same time, I the who I am still wants a lot of this stuff. So I'm not going to be too overly giving or too overly selfless in that case. And there's a level of balance involved.
Yeah, I
That's
see that
that's a
balance theme coming up. Go ahead, Aaron.
that was a big one. Is that having the balance between when you're actually being selfish and when you're being selfless. It's a really for individually, it's something that takes a lot of like it's all part of the self work. You have to know when you're actually being selfish, because you could think of something like maybe one person actually thinks that he has, that's because you mentioned socialism, Chris, and so it kind of goes into the sense, it's like, okay, well, 48, like if someone wanted 40 acres and a mule, right? Well, some people, like the community or the collective, might say that's too much, and then the individual might say, well, I'm alive just like anyone else, and I have the right to earn and keep what I have, so no one can tell me when I'm being really selfish or selfless unless I'm stealing, So I think it's a very personal aspect, and I think that the lower self, or like the lower ego, can be selfish, or it can be selfless. You can be so selfless that you're trying to speak for everyone, or you've forgotten who you are totally in the collective, and every one of your decisions is after some, it's you've essentially lost yourself, or and vice versa. You could go so far being selfish that you've lost your ability to be selfless and consider others. And so I think that yeah, the big balance is finding out where, you know, you're gonna realize when you're doing one or the other, you know, by just the results. You're gonna get results that are productive, or they're not productive, or they're not what you were after. And so then it's going to take the person to decide and find the balance and find their higher self, where they can reward and treat themselves and from what they, you know, they earned and have deserved, but also they're not taking from someone else, because that, I think that is where the selfish side starts to come in.
Awesome. Thanks, Aaron. Let's go to Leslie.
Well, I was thinking about selfishness from the idea of egotism, right? With the definition being the practice of talking and thinking about oneself excessively because of an undue sense of self-importance, right? And then thinking about the ego, what happens when we separate the ego, that facilitator, that consciousness, too much from other parts of ourself or from other living beings? When we lose sight of our connectedness within ourself and with outside of ourself. So when we wall off that part of ourself too much, then there's the risk of becoming solipsistic, right? Psychopathic, morally relativistic, egotistical. And those defenses become activated in the fight aspect, perhaps, you know. And then selflessness, I think about when the boundaries of self are too diffuse, unformed. We're not filtering enough of me versus not me. It can be dangerous as well. This is where people are at risk of martyrdom, codependency, gullibility, becoming easily manipulated. You lose yourself, no boundaries, right? Right brain imbalance. I was thinking about how, you know, trauma, you know, the triune brain, and how trauma is used in a sense to exploit the ego, right? Ego as a defense mechanism, as a way of protection, overprotection, as a way of, if you feel threatened, you know, and, you know, you think that everybody walking around you is a threat to you, then that ego becomes overactivated and we forget our unity. There's separateness occurs, right? So I think there's an interaction between how trauma or chronic stress interplays with this polarization of selfishness, selflessness, and where is this balance? And how do we hold our center through self-awareness, right? That state of consciousness, keeping our sense of self, protecting that sense of self from that balance point.
Great points. Thanks, Leslie. Cory.
Yeah, that's great. You guys mentioned really good points. So, Chris, you mentioned the word egocentrism. I think it makes it even more particular as to what we're talking about than, you know, when we're looking at like perhaps the negative connotation, right? Because now we're adding the word centricism around it, which means that the whole world revolves around you, sort of like that picture, right? You know, on one of Mark Passio's natural law slides with the solipsism, the whole universe, everything surrounds me. You know, I'm the center of the universe. That's like the egocentrism. So, you know, one may say, well, that's a balance because you're finding a center, but no, it's not a balance. So, you know, the balance is internal, external, micro, macro, as we've mentioned, and Leslie mentioned basically a dozen examples there of different things that are of need of balance. So there's so much there. And then even like you guys mentioned masks. I don't know if you guys noticed, but multiple of you guys mentioned like how society wears masks to sort of crowd their identity in different ways. I think we have an identity crisis on our hands, at least for the majority of the population. Like I said, people living up to certain expectations. Expectations by whom? Is it themselves? And then you have the question, well, that could be for ego, even though it's not for themselves, it's for somebody else, but they only care about their own image. So thus it's still ego. So situations like that, you obviously have to explore a little bit deeper. Where is the ego? Get to the root cause. Why are you feeling this way? The question of why. Why is someone committing a certain action? So when you say socialism, right, most people think, oh, well, this isn't egocentric because everybody's working together. Everybody's putting in money, at the same expenses or whatnot. But that's not the case. It's still a hierarchical system, still follows the pyramid system completely, because there is still people that you're dependent on for making the rules and keeping everything, secure, and asking for permission to basically do everything that you want to do. So even if that is the case among the general populace for paying this or paying that, it matters not, because that system is still in place. And yes, it will corrupt over time naturally. Like you mentioned, Chris, how it's not going to ever work out because it is simply unnatural for a human being to rule over another human being. For me to have full ownership over somebody else, talk about ego. Everybody is entitled to their own life. Everyone has their own life. They own themselves. And so part of being helpful and helping another person is taking the sacrifice, which I think is the word that kind of sums up the idea of helpfulness and the selflessness. Selfless, you're taking away the self, you're moving on to somebody else. You're saying, here, I'm going to help you instead of helping myself. So you are helping them. You're giving the sacrifice of your time and attention, the spiritual currency, to give them help, whatever it may be. So that is a sacrifice. And notice it's not in the lens of necessarily dying. Everybody thinks sacrifice is, maybe by those means, but the allegoric, sacrifice, doing something out of your time, out of your energy for your care, the eighth generative principle of natural law. In care, I don't see care often being associated with ego. Why? Because if you're going to care something, what are you going to care about? You're going to care about something else, something other than yourself. Or unless you care about yourself, then that could be ego. Could I say it could? It's because it doesn't, you still should care about yourself. You should care about your health. You should care about your life. You should care about what you do in this life and how you impact others, how you help them. Actually, how you be selfless. You need to be conscious yourself. You need to have that mind yourself. So in order to help someone else, in order to be selfless, you need to have some sort of conscious of self. And I think that's where the balance really strikes in. Mm-hmm. So socialism, this word social, and adding an ism to it, like we do with many isms, are often twisted into so many different ways. And I think even just the simple word language can catch people on that. But I think ego, most people can generally understand what it is. I think moreover, though, it is the harder explanation to have to describe why the systems that be and why everything around us has been formed out of ego. And that is why we have to leave it if we truly want to care for the world that we live in, if we truly want to sacrifice, give our courage and dedication, our time and energy towards something that actually matters, which is simply our own lives, and not pushing onto others our own ideologies or pushing onto others, this sense of ego, of having certain knowledge. Oh, I have something that he doesn't. Oh, it's childishness. And that's why some children can be very arrogant. You see some of the similar traits with egotism, which could be arrogance or selfishness, as you mentioned. So that's why I think we're breaking it down, and I think that's good. I'm not saying that children will fall to that. Some children would be very, helpful, but things can happen, right? Where, yeah, we should help our child and help them see things. There was another thing I was going to mention, but I kind of forgot. I will go back to it if I remember. There was
Next
a
round.
Small thing. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe it'll pop back up. Yeah, let's go to Will next.
Cool. This is a good question. So when we see selfishness, that can go back to being ego dominant, right? Dominant. And it's funny because the ego always wants to push separation, right? And it's because it's all about the individual, and we can actually see this manifest in the aggregate of humanity with government, right? Because the external control is a perfect example of a selfish society where people are ego dominant in their minds. Selflessness would be some, and that doesn't mean that you don't care about yourself, or even that you're putting someone up before your own personal well-being. I see it as more like you understand unity consciousness. You understand that at the core of all of us, we are one family, the source of consciousness, and we understand that if one suffers, all suffers. So you have the care and the respect to, you know, to help another person, you know, without any kind of requirement back. So, and that would be on the opposite polarity of government, external control, and slavery. We'll see freedom and care and cooperation and a voluntary society. So, you know, ego and the higher self and selfishness and selflessness kind of go hand in hand. It's a great it's a great example, and we can use that to see what's going on in the bigger picture in the world.
Yeah, and it's weird how intertwined all these ideas are. It's a little tricky to sort through them. Did you have any thoughts on this one, Ronnie?
Yeah, I mean, I can definitely speak to selfishness for sure. I was raised an only child, and I know very well what it is to be selfish and to just be consumed in yourself. And for someone that, you know, has been in this hippie jam band community with the LSD and mushrooms and just thinking we're woke as can be, and, you know, having that ego about ourselves, about what we've seen in these, you know, vision quests we've been on, I don't think I really noticed how selfish I was until I had a child. I mean, it like blew me away. I was like, oh my God, I've like this. It's like, I need to do that. I want to do that. I need to do that. And it's like, what's more important, man? You know,
Kids
like
will
you
do
got
that for
someone else
sure.
that's depending on you. That's none of that is important anymore. Just you need to throw, and it's like, all right, here we go, you know. And you know, I'm able to be selfless, but it's just interesting to witness that in my own life, you know. And I think that I've had an ego about myself, thinking that I'm an extremely selfless person. And when come to find out, you're like, oh wow, not really. Not really at all.
New age.
I mean, you know, granted, I've had my moments of selflessness, you know, as we all have. I mean, you try to help people when you can, and that can be the smallest of anything. I mean, something that always got me as a kid growing up in Catholic church was the story of the lady, a lady that goes to church, and she only has a penny to her name, and she donates the penny, and everyone sees and kind of scoffs at her, whereas, you know, everyone else is just laying down money, you know. And it's like, it was the power, the moral of the story is the power of intention. You know, what are you intending to do? What, you know, what is the purpose behind the action? And that's what matters ultimately, you know. And I've got an ego about being right. I'll tell you that, especially from like listening to so much Mark Passio over the last 3.5, 4 years. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I've listened to Natural Law Seminar like 7 times. I'm listening to it for the 8th time. The Dissidents, the Neo-Feminist Agenda. I mean, I'm just like constantly, it's like, yeah, fuck all these other podcasts. I'm just going to replay that while I'm at work, and I'm just like every day trying to soak it in because it's so much information. But the core issue of egotism, of selfishness, or at least what it leads to, or what it has led to, is this idea that other people have authority over other people. And I mean, I'm sure it's, talking to the birds in this group of people because of, especially of what you guys have already said. I'm like, oh my God, where are you people? Why don't you live down the street? But yeah, I mean, I don't want to ramble. I'm a talker, so.
But being the last one, you just knocked it out of the park,
Yeah.
man.
He
That
did.
hit home with me because I remember that same realization with kids and my kids, and I think it's funny how, speaking of Corey's nature is the answer, nature has this built-in mechanism to help us realize our true place in the universe when we have children, because it's like a real slap in the face, and the other thing I've thought about is I've come across this recently, an interview I was listening to, and I've seen it before in documentaries. When you hear about like an Aboriginal culture, people that haven't been immersed in modern society, people that live together in nature, they seem to have this more innate sense of sharing, where things aren't necessarily owned. You could be in someone else's hut and be like, oh, I like that piece of fur right there, and they're like, oh, okay, well, I guess you take it for a while and you have it. And you hear stories of explorers showing up and the natives just showing up and start taking their stuff because they're, as far as they were concerned, that's how we do. And to me it kind of ties into this, my idea here with the tree of life, that all things are connected, all life is connected at the root, and there really isn't all this space between us. And modern society has put up all these walls and fragmented us into these boxes, and like Corey's talking about the hierarchy, and um, it's a weird balance, because if you're too selfless and you're willing to just have no self at all, let someone else control yourself, you're a slave. You're an utter slave because you have no self. So you don't want to be completely selfless. But on the other hand, if you're too selfish, if you it's good to care about yourself, like you guys were saying, and have self-care. But if you're too selfish to the point where you're not even paying attention to everything else that's connected around you, then you become an authoritarian, or you're stealing other people's time and energy, because you're not taking the time to share what is natural, that this space that we're all sharing, and that we all need each other, and we all need things that each other have. So yeah, I guess I really, the thing that really hit on me, those people bringing up the balance aspect there, and how
It's all about it.
The middle
there's
path.
Because the hierarchy was formed like 5,000 years ago. I'm saying, like,
the
any
structure was
tribe
built,
based on imbalance. Certain people
right?
having certain resources more than others, they take it from the tribe and they use it for themselves. They're manipulating others, and that's how everything started. But it can't continue if people know their rights. It can't continue if people know the law. And that is the
and
idea.
and then that's perfect what you're saying, because that is a bridge to the last topic I wanted to end on, which was something Leslie brought up, which is intuition. And I think intuition is the missing tool, the missing ingredient to sort of sort all this out in a lot of ways, and what our modern culture seems to be forgetting about, because we get so left brained and so materialistic, and looking for answers from someone else, from some other source, from some authority, and where a lot of times the answer is in ourself and using our intuition. So let's kind of try to make this last round kind of quick, because we're getting close to an hour.
All
But
right.
just talk a little bit about intuition.
All right. So I think when it comes to intuition, I've had a lot of personal experience, especially just developing it and seeking it out. It wasn't really like a, here, you need to do this, but it's more like, it called to me. I don't know really if people here, I bet people here have said, it called to me is really difficult saying. So intuition could be anything from going back and giving a little bit more of the tip, or intuition could be like, oh, like, that reflex, like, so something was like the spidey senses. So when it comes to intuition involving when it comes to care, I feel like that really goes to the root of a person. If one has a developed sense of care, that level of intuition is, it flourishes. And I feel like that, that really embodies, what a good wholesome experience would, on this earth really is.
Love it.
Yeah, intuition. That's been a really really big one for me, and I think intuition is one of those ones that could. I don't know. So intuition, when you, for me, intuition comes in like asking questions that are kind of like just come up maybe randomly, or asking your own questions, relying on your own inner compass to look out and see. Intuition's a very obviously personal, and it's more of a feeling than it is just like a thing, and I think a really powerful part of my journey was being able to, it seems selfish to go inward and to retreat from the external. And I remember when I was going on my journey and looking in myself and looking out there, was that I left my family. I went to a place that was kind of isolated, and I left my job, and I left all these things that other people had made me believe that were so important. And it wasn't until I took that, maybe, it appeared selfish, but the intention, I think, and what I really did was actually for the betterment of myself and for the betterment of my community and my tribe. And I think that intuition plays a huge role in combating maybe like hyper intellectual thought, because it's almost like intuition is that chaos compared to the order, where we're looking at a situation and we think, oh, I have to act this way, that way, this way, that way. When in reality, your intuition is that personal. It's that personal, that personal aspect, the chaotic aspect that you still are free to decide. And if you trust your intuition, then that can really be profound in leading you out of the hyper intellectual mindset. And I can't remember who said it, maybe Jung, but it was the mission or the job of the psychoanalyst is to reunite the subject with their intuition. And I think that is a really really powerful statement. And intuition, and it's really close to self-knowing. I think I'll try to wrap it up, but Ronnie brought up the psychedelic community and how they they get the download, but then they're kind of just there, and they're in there with all this information and ego. And the true journey is actually taking that knowledge that you've gained, that insight, and practicing it and putting it into use and consolidating that, rather than just knowing it. You know what I mean? And so I remember my experiences with psychedelics. I haven't talked about them much, but one of the most profound moments of my life was recognizing where I am right. And I'm allowed to say I'm right, and I know where I'm right, and I'm right about this much. But like that's acceptable, and that's a powerful thing to feel and say, you know what, there's all these things that I was told my whole life, and this feeling, this power, this self-realization, that's a place that every person should be in, that sovereignty where you trust your intuition, you trust yourself, you trust that and you do know, about this much or whatever your block is, but yeah, that's kind of where I'll go with intuition.
What's really cool is every time you get to talking, Aaron, everything around you turns green. It's like the Hulk, your energy comes out.
Yeah, I was wondering if anybody else saw that. Yeah.
No, I'm not doing that. I really don't know why it's going on.
It's all good. Go ahead, Leslie.
So this is stirring up a lot of thoughts and a lot of personal issues in a way, memories, and part of my own process. So I'm going to try to summarize it without rambling. So the thought about being a mother, being a parent, and being a mother, you know, and the stereotype of the good mother being selfless, right? And that really was a theme that came up in my life. And I think it also came up through how my past, my history of how I was in relationship, losing myself, let's say, in relationship. And that process led to a lot of chaos and pain and problems, right? And actually went to a therapist once, you know, after an incident of violence in my relationship. And she said to me, about the only thing she said to me was, beware that you don't lose yourself. And so I had to spend a lot of time in my future, like contemplating that. What does that mean? So when I finally, you know, ended up being married, had children, and I made a decision that I needed to leave that relationship. And what I was accused of, the thing that kept the mantra from my ex was, you're so selfish, you're so selfish, you're so selfish. And as I reflected on my life and my relationships, I realized that that when I look back at every relationship, I had an intuition. I had a knowing that just sort of popped into my consciousness about every relationship before I even like committed to it or went into it. And those intuitions were all right. They were correct. When I look back, I'm like, oh my God, my intuition was like spot on. But there's other parts of my brain that were discounting that intuition and confusing my decision making and my process, you know, and led to this like very circuitous, like crooked journey of learning to finally come to that point, like you were saying, that like you come back to recognize that intuition is true knowing yourself, and that it is part of our protective mechanism too, and a way to not lose ourselves in the negative extreme, not in the positive sense of selflessness. So, you know, in terms of being a mother, a good mother, I had to like really deal with this of when I made that decision that I had to figure out and, you know, establish who I am. It came in conflict with that belief of the good mother being selfless, right? And was used as a weapon against me. And, but without having gone through that, my evolution wouldn't have brought me here, you know? But in terms of the intuition, I've come to recognize how important that is and to be very attuned. And because our thoughts can really take us astray. So I'll just stop there.
Awesome. I love the personal stories. That really helps bring it home.
Mm-hmm.
Cory?
Yeah, awesome. Just had to make sure I'm not muted. Awesome, Leslie. Thanks for sharing that. You know, I wish I had a bit more personal sharing for that, and I'm sure I do. I'd have to pinpoint it. But I do want to touch up, because I don't want to make it too long. So I do want to touch up on Chris's point. So you're talking about like the tribes and stuff, right? And how they're more caring and so forth. It's also the result of less consumerism and materialism in general, which does feed from the systems that be, whereas in nature, it's not as emphasized. It will still take place, and creativity will just blow out the water, you know, when we live more in alignment with nature. It would be incredible, but you would not see the extremes of consumerism and materialism as you see today. So I just want to make that point. And you were saying, you know, this is the answer. I'm like, just thinking in my head, nature is the answer. But anyways, You mentioned intuition. I think it's important to also associate that and creativity to the right brain, which is an aspect, obviously, of the world that a lot of people have been looking into, especially in the New Age community, even though they might be a little too right brain extreme. It's why a lot of people have piqued interest into those type of communities, because the world is generally left brain imbalanced, but it's both. It's just the world is generally left brain imbalanced, as Mark Passio says. And I even have a source on my PowerPoint slide that you can find at nita.one advanced perspective. So anita.one/advanced perspective. I have a slide about Gandhi, right? And how he took something called intuitive action. So kind of combining the left and right brain. We know left brain is more action oriented, more masculine, whereas the right brain is more feminine, intuitive. So looking at, well, how could we take action based on truth? It kind of comes together perfectly when we say the word intuitive action. So we're thinking about what we're doing and we're putting it out to the world. We're not just doing something baselessly without thinking. We're also not just thinking so much about everything and not doing anything. So those are two extremes, going back to the whole idea of balance. And I've also assimilated that to patience and ambition. So having the patience, listening, and so forth is more of that intuition, and the ambition is more of that outgoing. How do you bring the two? How do you bridge the two? And so forth. And even as, like Aaron said, internal monarchy. Notice he's using the word internal, intuition, internal. So these are things we get from inside, looking in, not so always looking out, because we can learn from the world around us by also observing inside of us. And this is something we see even at a molecular level, especially with the principles of vibration and so forth, right? Everything vibrates in the body, there's energy, all so forth, mentalism, etc. But internal sovereignty, right, is what Aaron Butler mentioned, right? Internal monarchy, so sovereignty, having that intuition to lead ourselves is very important. And that's why even I say the word in nature. So it's combined the word innate and nature, because we're looking inside our own nature, human nature, and looking at the world around us. What is nature? So in nature, what is innate? Are we looking and observing and learning from ourselves, from the world around us, and looking at what's innate in the world around us and what's innate inside ourselves? Because if we learn what's innate inside ourselves, we know the blueprint to the body, and thus we can heal the body by knowing its anatomy, by knowing how it works, by knowing how it digests. And then the same thing for the world. We want to learn about the world, we learn about the innate alchemy, whatever you want to call it, of the world, right? So that could be natural law, all the laws that are existent, how everything interacts, how beings live in nature, how we are to produce food and so forth, everything. It all is part of that anatomy. So, I would consider that the external anatomy, and maybe, if someone wants to call it astrology or whatever. There's so many connections you can make, and that just shows you the power of how much our ancestors looked into this idea of intuition, because they had so much time to observe themselves and the world around them. People need to take the time nowadays to find that in themselves. They need to take the time to be patient, already utilizing that intuition. Maybe go out in nature or take some silence, listen, breathe, try to find themselves. And that is not, crazy right brain extremism. It's something that every being should do if they want to be in that parasympathetic nervous system, the lax state of belly breathing, of being relaxed, reducing stress in a world that has so much consumerism and all these advertisements and stressors, as we call them, around us, trying to, in effect, denature us from who we are. So we do have to understand that nature is the answer. And with that, you are the answer as well. You're the question, though, because nature is the answer. You have to realize that for yourself. So you are the one at question, and that's why I have a show. It's called You Are a Question.
I love puns, and so I really like the innate in nature. That's good. Let go in nature and study what is innate. That's great. I love it. Will.
Yeah, to simplify the profound, intuition, you just look at the actual word, it's insight, to look at from within. So I consider intuition as a seventh sense, the five senses, the sixth being memory, the seventh being intuition, and the eighth being imagination. And your body is a receiver that filters in information all the time. Not just the mind or the brain, heart and the guts as well. The whole body does that. So if you're a receiver, your intuition is the signal that's communicating to you. And you're actually can pull in information from what Rupert Sheldrake calls the morphogenic field, which is the field of consciousness around us all the time. Actually, mammals can do this as well. That's why your dog knows when you're going to be home in 15 minutes, and he's sitting there right at the door waiting for you, like clockwork. It happens all the time. They've done case studies with this, and so they have an intuition that they're tapping in. So the science behind intuition is just you're just tapping into the morphogenic field, is how I look at it. And of course, having a good brain balance and having your body or your receiver in a state of balance, that signal is going to be clearer and your intuition is going to be stronger and more accurate, because you can't get false intuition, which is just you're not interpreting the information correctly, so it's working against you. So yeah, intuition.
Bad signal. Yeah.
It's like static or noise. Yeah.
Sure.
Dissonance.
Oh,
Yeah.
I'll say one thing too. The ego does not like the intuition, because the intuition connects us to source and unity, and the ego always wants to promote being separate. So the ego, that's why it's the gut feeling. Well, what's right after that? It's the ego saying, don't listen to it. So just throw that little caveat in there.
Yeah.
Ronnie, do you got anything to add?
Hey, I don't, but other than just compliments to all of you, Will, Chris, Cory, Leslie, Aaron, and Nathan, I just want to say thank you. And you all have such powerful voices. Just like the sound of each one of your voices is just really powerful. And again, Cory, thank you for inviting me on here. And
Dude, your voice is powerful. They need to know more about you.
Ronnie fucking Ross.
Yeah. When I was a freshman, just so you guys know, when I was a freshman in high school, this girl that I became great friends with, never dated or anything, but when I told her my name, she asked me what my name is. I said, Ronnie Ross. She was like, Ronnie fucking Ross. And like literally from freshman year of high school till, 10, 15, 20 years later, people are still calling me Ronnie fucking
That's
Ross.
your middle name.
I thought you said Ronnie fucking rocks.
Oh, no.
Ronnie Ross rocks.
That's it.
That's awesome, brother. Thanks for coming on, man. Appreciate it.
Yeah, great
Thanks
talk.
for being here.
I want to add one thing that's kind of my pet peeve, and it's this like statement that protecting individual rights and protecting self is not selfish, right? Because I think there's this inversion going on in the world right now where it's like, think of other people, wear your mask, you're being selfish, and it's been totally reversed and inverted, as if like putting aside yourself is somehow caring about the whole, but that
Yes.
And somehow I think we really need to get across that, protecting everyone's individual rights, everyone's, is not selfish, including if I protect my own.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Another thing to mention, go ahead, Ronnie.
There's just something just came to mind that I've been trying to tell as many people as possible. The whole issue with the mask, the right that is being taken away is your freedom to choose. Now, granted, it's not, because I don't know. I live in Middle Tennessee, outside of Nashville. Yeah, there's mask mandates everywhere. I still go wherever the fuck I want and never wear a mask, and have never been stopped. I know Costco is going to stop me, so I ended my membership there, and I don't even deal with it. But so, yeah, the freedom's not being taken away, but it's so obvious that it's heading that way, and it's already that way in society. 2020, I have no friends anymore. They're gone. They're completely gone. from this whole thing, because I love them so much, I will scream the truth down their throat. And I will just they're like, you keep wanting to have this conversation. I'm like, yeah, because you don't get it yet. It's time to awaken, you fool. You know? So in saying that, that's just what I wanted to say is, and you feel free to use it. The freedom that is being taken away is your freedom to choose what you can or cannot put on your own body. That is immoral. You cannot start in immorality to gain morality, because you will always be in an immoral act. That's not how it works.
That's the voice.
You'd
right
think it'd
there.
be common
That's
sense,
your
I'm
right?
right.
Nice.
Yeah, he thinks he doesn't have a voice. What is he talking about?
Yeah.
That's it.
There's
it.
no such thing as
That's
group
what
rights.
needs
There's
to
only
Linear
individual
progression.
rights.
Linear progression. You must start with good to get good. You can't start with evil and get good. It doesn't work out
Yeah.
that way.
You know,
It's
people
plain and
have
simple.
people have said I have ego for wanting to educate others about natural law. I'm like, really? Taking action is ego? You know, action is a left brain component, and I have to merge that with intuition. At least I'm not baseless action. Like I'm saying,
And ego's not a dirty word.
Yeah, it's a productive. Ego can be a productive tool, and if we didn't all accept ego, we wouldn't be sitting here. You know, like you're interacting with ego constantly. Your ego's constantly separating things. Like, in order to have this conversation, I'm separating a lot of different things, a lot of different, you know, aware things that I could be aware of. Ego has to consolidate it. Okay, I'm in a conversation with some rad people, and this is what I'm focusing on. You know, ego, that's a productive thing. It's like, and you have to accept that you do. In order to even teach, you have to accept that you know. And nowadays, people don't like to see people that know say that they know things. So that's your belief. No, brother. I know it. You know what I mean? Like, that's healthy ego. Like, you know, you have the right to be sovereign, and that's it.
and
You
we're
know,
willing
you
to
don't
share
throw
it.
it away.
It's
And
not
the-
like we're
the-
Let me,
pushing it in other people's
Let me see if I
faces.
could tie it together. In the end, this is how I would kind of put it all together. Again, the tree of life, the all, the great everything, the universe, right? We are manifestations. We grew out of, we're part of the all. We're part of God, right? And we've been given this opportunity to live in this existence and have this ego, to have this personality, to be a transmitter, like Will was talking about, you know. So if you can imagine that you're a little radio, right, and there's a band and there's extremes on either end, and you can be polarized to one side or the other. If you can turn your dial to the middle and touch back in to the universal, the all, then that's when you get in touch with your intuition, and that's when you're connecting with God, the all. And when you can do that, you can find the truth, because that's what we are. We're born of the truth, and what we have is the choice, like Ronnie said. Right?
Like it.
Perfect.
Nice.
The intuitive.
And the
with
ego hates
conscience.
that. The ego hates absolutes, but that is the truth, brother.
Conscience is natural. It's our conscience.
That's the opportunity we have to experience here. So
To
let's
suppress our
make
conscience,
the most of it.
We'd be suppressing nature to suppress our human natural selves, our conscience to make decisions. It's not even a whether of natural law morality or not. It's suppressing the conscience, suppressing the ability, the simple ability to be human, the simple ability to live.
Tapestry and the
choose.
branches of the tree and the leaves and the blossoms and the flowers. Like, we are each a part of that, you know, making this tree. Even the shape right now in our pictures.
Love it.
Well, it's been a great conversation. I feel like we're all just getting fired up. We want to keep going, but I do want to bring this one to a close, because keep it within a time limit where people can actually sit down and digest it. And we'll keep going. And not next week, but the week after, we'll do this again. And hopefully whoever can come back. I'm really glad you all came, and I'm inspired. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you. It was a lot
Thanks,
of fun.
everybody.
Thank
you.
Thank you, everyone.
Appreciate it.